The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. Summaries of Chapter 8 to 9. Chapter 8. Concerning those who become princes by evil means. In addition to good fortune and personal prowess, criminal acts can facilitate a man's rise to power. Those who come to power by crime are treacherous, pitiless, and irreligious. These princes can achieve power, but never glory. King Agathocles of Syracuse 317–310 BC conquered all of Sicily except for territory dominated by Carthage. He was eventually defeated by the Carthaginians. Agathocles was a common citizen and rose to power through crime. Agathocles joined the militia, rose to a leading rank, and then assembled a meeting of the Senate at which he ordered his men to murder all the senators and install himself in power. Agathocles proved as competent as any eminent commander, but his reign encountered constant difficulties. Cruelty, which is itself evil, can be used well if applied once at the outset. Thereafter, it should only be employed in self-defense and for the greater good of the prince's subjects. When the prince seizes a state, he must determine how much injury to inflict. The prince needs to strike all at once and then refrain from further atrocities. Gradually, resentment will fade and his subjects will eventually forget. Most importantly, the prince should be consistent in the way he treats his subjects. Chapter 9. Concerning the civil principality. The prince can achieve power through the favor of his fellow citizens and become the head of constitutional principalities. In every, there are two groups of citizens, one common people and two nobles. Common people are naturally disposed to avoid domination and oppression by the nobles. In contrast, the nobles are naturally disposed to dominate and oppress the common people. This opposition between these two groups results in either a principality, a free city or republic, or anarchy. The power within a principality lies with either the nobles or the people. If the nobles cannot dominate, they strengthen their position by making one of the nobles a prince and hope to accomplish their own ends through the prince's authority. The people follow similar course. If they cannot withstand the nobles, they will make one of the people a prince. The prince placed in power by nobles will find it more difficult to maintain his position. Nobles are much harder to satisfy than the people. The people only seek to be left alone, while the nobles are less honest and oftentimes outright deceitful. Nobles are astute and cunning and always safeguard their interests. If the people are hostile, the worst that can happen is desertion. If the nobles are hostile, the prince should expect both desertion and active opposition. Nobles will be either dependent or independent of the prince's control. The prince should honor and love those dependent on him. Nobles who remain independent are either timid or ambitious. Timid ones are benign, but be wary of ambitious nobles. They may become enemies in times of adversity. The prince created by the nobles must still win over the people's affection, which can serve as protection from hostile nobles. Benevolence is the best way to maintain the mandate of the people. If people expect hostility from a prince, but instead receive kindness instead, they will feel an obligation to their prince. Principalities usually face difficulties when switching from a government with limited powers to one that is more absolute. In this transition, the prince can rule directly or indirectly through magistrates. The prince is more vulnerable in the latter because he is dependent on the will of his magistrates. If magistrates revolt, the prince will be unable to assume absolute power, because people are accustomed to obeying the magistrates rather than the prince. Analysis of Chapter 8 to 9. Machiavelli makes an argument for the importance of a domestic power base. He acknowledges the necessity of cruelty and crime and establish this power. Machiavelli does not advise moderation in cruelty, but rather a limit on how long extreme cruelty is to be employed. Even when cruelty is not needed, Machiavelli still described the necessity of playing a dangerous game of internal politics, involving the pitting of one group of citizens against another. Machiavelli considers cruelty as evil, but argued that it is a necessary evil and justifiable in the interests of some great public goods, like internal stability. He does, however, make distinction between power and glory. He considers those who come to power by crime are treacherous, pitiless, and irreligious. These princes can achieve power, but never glory. Lastly, Machiavelli emphasizes that there is inevitable tension between common people, nobles, and the ruling prince. In prosperous times, it is fashionable to declare allegiance to the prince. But during times of danger, trusted men become scarce. A wise prince must find a way to ensure everyone is dependent on his authority.